just kicking off on our webinar shortly. Just as always, we'll give it a couple of minutes just to, I don't know, I guess let everybody show up and attend. But thank you all for joining, right on time. This is very nice of you. As maybe a little bit of a recap refresh, today we're going to be talking about project intake forms and, to be fair, a couple of other things that we've been working on lately. So there's a few things to kind of take a look at, show off, and all the rest, but hopefully you'll like all of them. Um, there we go. Okay, lovely to see that coming on. I'll start my screen share now, and I guess without any feedback otherwise, we'll have to assume that it's working. There we go, though. So there's ProWorkflow, and there's my PowerPoint. Lovely. Okay, well, I guess we can skip past title slide and on to the secondary title slide. My favorite. Cool. And it looks like we are, what, a couple of minutes into it, and I think most people look to be here. So let's get into it. Okay. So, like I was saying, here to introduce you to the project intake form today. So just as a very kind of base level, project intake form is going to be a new way to introduce projects into your tool that don't just rely on staff kind of creating things haphazardly, allows for a lot more control, a lot more certainty, and a lot more data retrieval, which is obviously pretty key and something that we're quite keen on. Now, I guess when we initially planned this webinar, as you might have suspected, project web intake form was kind of the main thing that we wanted to talk about. But we've done some other stuff recently, for instance, the calendar functionality and some development on the views that we're saving. So this webinar kind of got chipped away at a little bit, and we're going to be talking about those too. In fact, we're going to be talking about those first. Um, so I do apologize. You've been tricked, regrettably. Um, as well as that, we do have some other changes that I'll go through briefly. So I guess these apply to sort of various plans and whatnot, but it's worth knowing about them, even if you're not necessarily using all of the features referenced. So just rapid fire round. One of the first things that we introduced, you might be familiar that recently we introduced costing as a part of our financial suite, which is really good, really cool. Means that we've got pay rates for all of our staff, means we can assess relative costs across items and projects, which is really nice to see. But there was, I guess, a permissions issue relative to it in the sense that this is kind of a new set of data. We might consider it to be a little bit more in-depth, private, sensitive than maybe just what we're charging our customers, at least in terms of, what we want our staff to know. So we've added a new permission now, and you are able to specify whether you want a given staff member to be able to look at all of the financials or all of the financials as well as the costing components. Just for that little extra layer of control. We've got a brand new redesigned homepage, which we'll go into in a second, which includes a calendar, which is, again, kind of one of the main things. We've got additional groupings for the summary of projects report, just to add a couple more lenses to how you look at those things. We have an uninvoiced dollar amount field that's been added to reports. Obviously, now that you can pass off time records and sort of assess, have these been invoiced for and have these not, we've now got a basically dollar amount to whatever is remaining on a given project. And then we've put that into reports. So you can do a nice big assessment that kind of just looks through all of the active work that you've got going on at the moment and the highest value that's kind of being left on the table. We've now got an hours remaining column that's across both projects and items. That'll just help you kind of assess what is left in terms of time. We've now got client tags. So some of you may be familiar with the idea that clients can have their own sort of unique tagging system that's separate from the project and item tagging system. Now those show up in the project details page. So if you do kind of want to see a little bit more with respect to your client and information about them, that's there as well. We've now got these things called library linking project. That's basically an expansion of the bookmarking system. It just means that you can link certain projects together to provide for quick links between them. So if you do sort of want to be jumping between them, or this project has something in particular to do with this one, maybe this is the groundwork, and then over here we've got something that's to do with the further development. Both projects separate, but having related data, we can jump between them quickly and sort of assess statuses and whatnot. Invoice time and invoiced amount fields now in reports. I guess that's kind of an expansion on the invoiced dollar amount. Um, but there you go. Invoiced time is now available. And we also have a new field in reports called the basically percentage of days that we are through for a given item or project. So that's the high level stuff. It's smaller, but it's all reasonably handy and it's kind of worth looking at, you might say. Now, before I guess we move on entirely, let's talk about calendar functionalities and saving views. So let's jump into, there we go, my tool just here. So, I guess as far as the calendar goes, and the intake form, to be fair, you may be familiar with the sort of core concept, just because they both existed in some capacity in our old classic plan. But we've significantly expanded and resigned these tools to support more flexible workflows and better operational visibility. Now, I've already rambled on for about sort of 5-ish minutes, I think it is so far. But the remainder of the talk should only be about 30. And then after that, we'll get into some Q&A. So feel free to be dropping in some questions over the course. And at the end, I will talk through all of those. Okay, we've been looking at it for long enough. Let's actually talk about this calendar. So the previous calendar existed on the time page, straightforward view of scheduled work, tasks, projects. And with the new version, we wanted to make it flexible. So not only can you see that we can create things if we're hovering over different days, whether that's a project or an item. We can actually move things between various days as well. So those are some broad functional improvements. But we kind of focused on three main things except for that interactivity. That was filtering, that was timescale flexibility, and that was visibility across project durations. So to look at filtering first, the new calendar supports filtering across most core project and item attributes. This includes things like managers, teams, statuses, work stages. That's all here to play with. As well, I will point special attention to the date status, just because that color coding can be important. We actually have a legend down the bottom here as well, just so you are absolutely sure what you are looking at. Basically, green means something starting, yellow and red means things are, meant to be due on a given day. But we have an extra distinction in the red for overdue. That means we have something that's still active that is falling on a day that is basically before today. So we see the dark blue identifies today's date. Anything before that that would have been yellow flicks over to the red color. Just like that. So what can we do with that? Filtering, that is. So a project manager could look at maybe only projects that belong to certain approval stages. So if we did have a work state that's sort of related specifically to approval tasks, that's a really good way to find that. If you were a designer, you could look at only tasks that are assigned to you by hitting that My Activity button, and then that maybe are due this week. You could also be an operations lead that's reviewing delayed work across multiple teams. And again, maybe that's defined by the work stage, maybe that's defined by the fact that there's a due date, maybe that's defined by certain projects. Regardless, all of it is here for you to mess around with. The goal here was to make the calendar a more useful sort of operational planning tool rather than just a visual overview, which we felt it was a little bit dangerously close to being before. The other thing that we have here is flexible views. So you'll notice at the top right-hand side here, in addition to just the standard, Gregorian, Julian calendar, whichever one it is, as well as just that standard monthly view, we've also got fortnightly and weekly. So this really just depends on how your team prefers to manage workload. But I will mention, if your team does have a familiarity with our old Labs app, which was the weekly workload, this one is, at least visually speaking, pretty close. The only real difference here is that this one, as opposed to having all of the staff members listed on the left-hand side, you would just need to filter for a given staff member. But contestably improved interactivity. I'll mention as well that you can click on any one of these items. So if you didn't want to do anything like reassign or add any more detail, add to the description, that is available to you from the screen as well. One more thing just in terms of how we're viewing things, even if we are in a monthly view, you can just the top left here, use the switch to change to a itemized list view. Which, yeah, really just depends how you like to look at things. But for those of you that like lists, we have something for that. Now, this last one is a pretty big improvement, depending on who you ask. But if you ask me, pretty big. That is visibility across task duration. So you might notice one of the relative, I guess, weaknesses of looking at things like this and our old calendar as well, to be fair, is that it's listing start and finish dates. But for instance, we might have days like the 3rd or the 26th or the 29th that do have things on them. It's just they don't necessarily have anything starting or finishing on the specific date. They have things that are ongoing through these dates. So we've got this button just across the top here where you can click and it'll span the tasks across the day. So it'll take the start day right to the finish day. And it just means that, those days, the 26th, there is stuff going on. There are 5 different things going on, in fact. That's way busier than we thought. Third has 2 different things. So although, we had some clear days before, no, we didn't, actually. No, we didn't. Now, especially with combined with the weekly view, this is pretty much this is why I mentioned the weekly workload app. This is pretty much exactly what that looks like. So it's I guess yeah, good to have that visibility as to when things are ongoing as well as just when they're starting and finishing. So this makes it much, much easier to identify workload density, scheduling conflicts, extended project activity, all at a glance. And there you go. So this is a lovely new view, and we hope you appreciate it. An expansion of the dashboard, but I guess this is the other thing to mention. It's found on the home page now. So as before it was on the time page, you'll find it on the home page and in the upcoming activity section. Now, a lot of these filters, you'll notice that it did clearly remember how I kind of had things sorted. So that'll be saved to your local browser. So you can jump between pages and it'll still come back and it'll remember how you had things set up, provided we haven't logged out or cache cleared in the meantime. Now, that was the intake form. Sorry, that was the calendar. The next thing I'd like to show you is just how we're doing views. So where we kind of landed with this is we did have this filtering tool and we were allowing you to save views through this, but we've also realized that we have this column section here, which, obviously it's about showing which fields are available versus which information is being filtered out, which is slightly different. But by virtue of the fact that we're creating these filter views for the sake of, I want to look in my example, I want to sort of find out what software needs testing, what releases we're doing, and I need to identify which tasks belong to a certain work stage so I know that I'm ready to sort of jump in and work on them. Now, as well as filtering for that information, I might actually have a different lens on what information I need displayed depending on sort of what I'm filtering for. So that's kind of the idea. We've married up the columns editor and the filtering editor into its own sort of saved view system. So that's kind of the first big thing to understand about this one. With that said, and just I'll change a couple of filters here just so you can kind of see it. But if I did put, say, assigned to me, and I wanted it to be medium priority stuff, let's say, that saves a certain view in my projects. I guess I didn't really filter anything down there. But once I've done that, I can hit the save button up the top, and I can either update the existing view that I'm in, or I can save a new view. And if I do that, let's call it mid-tier priority. And you see, I can save that as the default, which will mean that'll be what my active page just sort of changes to in a given. And I didn't save it, did I? Good. I didn't want to anyway. Okay, there you go. And I can actually share it with everybody as well. So this is the other kind of big portion of this release. So as well as being able to switch between these views, I can actually add them, to my wider kind of page here. So if I do click into this section and I hit this little manage views icon here, I've got a few choices, a few pretty cool choices here. So first one is basically setting something as the default view. That'll just mean, again, that the active page changes to filtering on this basis for whatever we have it filtered for. We also have the option to save something to the side navigation menu. So this is one that I've just made for myself, but if I do click this button, you'll see on the left-hand side of the screen, I've now got mid-tier priority showing up as its own page. So instead of having to come into active and then filter to a certain view, I can just kind of keep this here. And this is always going to be live updating, keeping up with whatever I'm entering into the tool. But it'll be freely available to me whenever I need it, which is lovely to see. Now, if we do come back to our view section, the other option that we have there is functionally a similar thing, but it will be basically a separation for the views between private and public. So now, as a manager, let's say, I can come through and decide basically what my staff members need to see in terms of what columns are available and how the information is filtered. And then I can set that view to public and I can basically allow them access to that. Now, in the case of project financials, which is this page that you see here, I've got that set as a public view and also as one that I've saved to the sidebar. So that means other staff members in this account that have the adequate permissions are going to be able to see project financials as a view that I've saved. And you see how I've oriented that as I've got all the cost information, I've got all the financial information, all ready to go. So maybe I'm sharing that with the operational team at my company there. So that is, I guess, the bulk of it. The last option there is just renaming, or the last two options there are just renaming and deleting. But do keep this in mind. Obviously, this is a pretty big expansion on how we do filtering and how we save things in. So worth thinking about and perhaps worth using, depending on circumstance. Now, one thing to notice with this is that it's basically different across different pages. So of course, active project and completed project, those are kind of two different views, so to speak, or how they're being filtered is kind of fundamentally different. So for this page, you would have your own set of views. For active projects, you would have your own set of views. So here we've still got workflow financials and mid-tier priority that we just created. For completed, we don't have anything. We haven't made anything there yet. Now, same goes for items. Obviously, items are a different thing themselves as well. So I've got, in this case, workflow and financial, but I've listed them as items. In much the same way, I can still come in here and add that to the side navigation. So my items workflow, you can see, it's just been added now. One thing to mention also is that they are still going to be different within the item view as well. So that's kind of three different places, I guess. Technically five. Technically five. Just with active and completed for projects, active and completed for items, and then also the project description page, item view here as well. So all of those have their own different view pages, but again, with relatively good reason. And the way we've set it up, although that may sound like a lot of different areas that you do need to set it up, we've done it in such a way that, especially with shared views, you should really only need to mess around with the stuff the once, and then you'll have all of the different views and all the different tools available to you from that point onward, and it'll be nice and easy to switch between them and basically get the information that you want to get. So there you are. Hopefully, this new view filtering is something that you will enjoy. Now then, I guess on to the star of the show. So let's start talking about our project intake forms. So this is one of the larger workflow improvements that we've been working on because it changes how projects enter the platform altogether. So in the previous system, forms were basically tied to templates and requests, and that was pretty good, but it also required the client, that is you, to have a sort of working knowledge of HTML, which is a pretty, high barrier to entry. Even me was struggling with that, believe me. So what we wanted to do was make a new system that was accessible to non-technical users and just make the process a lot more dynamic and automated. So the result is a form builder that allows teams to create intake forms in a visual user interface, will capture structured project information, and will automate project setup. So that's all good news. Now, I guess some comes the second question from here, which is kind of why use forms? Now, you may be thinking, if I just come back to the projects page and I hit the add button here, what have I got to do? I've got to enter a client, got to enter a title, maybe load a template, but that's not really required at this point. So, I mean, once I've made really the two selections, creating a project is that easy, which is good. But again, when we're talking about structure, when we're talking about data capture, there's maybe not anything that's required, that's necessary, that I really sort of need to pull in here. So, why use forms at a high level? instead of having things come through, emails, chat messages, spreadsheets, meetings, and then you've kind of just filling out this with as much information as you have, we've got a dedicated form system. So if I open up a form that I made in advance, so I can see that by hitting the add button, and then you see I've got pathways and conditions just up the top here. So this is a form that I created in advance. Think about it like I don't know, I guess cooking channel. This is a cake that I made earlier. And later on in the webinar, we'll make one together. But that kind of helps with the time setup and watching me awkwardly type my way through this. Okay, so this is one of these forms sort of in more depth. So what we're going to reduce with this is we're going to stop missing information. We are going to stop manual project setup. We're going to stop inconsistent workflows. And we're going to reduce the amount of time it's spent triaging work before it even begins. Now, as we can see from some of the stuff that we're kind of entering here, forms can capture pretty much any information that you need. Whether it's a radio selection, whether it's date-based information, whether it's required information like that one, whether it's a budget, a certain contact, form entry, should you want. There's also certain approval requirements that we could add, maybe client details, tech specs, long form briefing information. Really, all of it is available for entry just here. Now, an important thing to mention with these forms as well is okay, you actually can't see my URL, but what I'll tell you is that these forms are available on their own URLs. So if I come back into this, into my actual tool here, basically the forms can exist in either an internal or external capacity. So internally, teams could use them to standardize requests between, departments and teams. For example, that could be marketing requests, IT requests, onboarding processes, procurement approvals, or creative briefs. Externally, like the ones that we saw there, forms can be shared through public URLs, which would allow clients or contractors or just really any external stakeholder to submit requests directly into Nexus without needing the platform itself. So if your business had really strict requirements that need to be met, think about like approval forms, signed documents, before work can begin. One idea that we kind of had, I guess, for using these forms is that we could entirely remove the permission of all of your staff to just create projects, like we saw earlier with just this add project button and these relatively scant details that we see here. So in fact, it would be the case where nobody has the ability to just add a project. Everybody has to use a form. So that's going to ensure that all projects are created sort of via that permission, and then you've got all of the relevant information supplied right out the gate. No questions, no skirting the process, no differentials. So, moving on from there, we come back to our form that we've built. Basically, there is a bit of a structure to these where we can have several pages worth of information, but it may be that your client is only using a few of them. So you'll see here that going through the website build, our sort of pathway that I've created here, that's 3 pages worth of a total of 7 pages. So although it says 7 pages up the top here, I really only need my client to fill out 3 for any given scenario that they might be carrying through. So we can really do anything with these. Again, all of these questions are customizable and available to us, but it depends exactly what I've entered. Now, if I say I've worked with this in the past, yes, no, other, and then you see there, I've got a field that's just jumped out of hiding, I guess would be the term. And it allows us to sort of explain, okay, if we kind of have, kind of haven't worked with you in the past, what do we actually mean by that? Here's an opportunity to expand on our answer. Now, it depends on what answers you pick, but we can actually build automations into this as well. So it might be that because this first question here is talking about, at a high level, what kind of work needs to be done. Let's say we belong to, I guess in this case, a sort of digital marketing agency. We do website builds, we do brand working, and we do urgent work. we can build different templates into each of these selections. So when the project actually goes through and gets created, and let's do that now. We'll say that this is a page refresh. What page needs refreshed? Let's say it's our pricing page. What's our budget? Let's say it's 20,000. We don't have the primary contact, but that's okay. We don't have a branding guide. And so that branding guide question is going to go away. And then we're going to submit that answer. And now that we've done that, I can come back into my projects and then find that project in our list down here. So pathways and conditions. Um, Now, I guess this is begets a relevant point. I didn't provide, I'm realizing now, an option to basically provide a title of some kind. And so nothing got passed through, but you see the title got passed through. It got assigned to a certain thing. It got assigned to pending because that was one of the automations I got built in. Got set up to consulting firms. A template was included, which means there are some start and finish dates that have been included as well, which is all lovely to see. So again, depending on the answers that I provide, I'll get something different, which is very fun. Now, at any given point as well, I can come back into the details section. Page layout. In fact, I can come to the submission form section, and then that will exist as its own page. So I can always check back and sort of see, hey, what did the client actually say? What information do I need to be aware of? What might have happened here? So there we are. Now coming back into our form, we just close out of that page and open up a new copy. You might notice that forms are basically made up. In fact, the best place to show you this might actually be from the settings themselves. And coming into my, where are they? Intake forms just here, because then I can edit the form and I can sort of show you what it's talking about. So we've got a couple of different form types when it comes to building all of this out. The first kind is going to be ProWorkflow fields. So these are fields that have a direct answer in ProWorkflow, whether that's something like a manager, a category, a due date, a work stage. That's something that we can directly query the client on. They can enter that information and automatically it will be populated. So in this case, the first question I had was client. So that was keeping track of the fact that I was logged into the tool, so it's going to use my profile as the client profile. But because that form is available externally, if we didn't have someone's details, it would ask for them. And then it would populate a new client profile based on that information. So again, right-hand side, ProWorkflow fields, that's all platform specific. Stuff on the left here, this is where you've got a few more choices and you can get a bit weird with it. So the text entries, there's number fields. There's also drop downs where you can enter in custom options. Same goes with single choice and multiple choice radio buttons. Well, radio buttons and checkboxes, respectively. We've then also down the bottom here, we've got things like addresses, file uploads, and basically question matrices is something worth showing you as well. So if we go through the brand refresh side of things, so that we have worked in the past, please have any documents you have. This actually illustrates the nice difference between a step and a page. Again, that's just a certain level of nesting information and it can help with automation when we get there. But there we go. And then this here is what we might refer to as a question matrix. So this is an opportunity to kind of lay out a whole grid's worth of answers. But in this case, I've used it to kind of talk about the customer's brand. Sort of say, okay, well, if we're doing a brand refresh, what do you like about your current brand? And maybe they like the color scheme, don't like the fonts, do like the interface elements. So we say, cool, we're going to keep these but slightly modulate them, and then the fonts will just entirely redo. But it's a good way to get that kind of information. Now, the other portion of this is that even if you're using these form fields here, we can still automate them and we can still populate our project based on the information listed. So for example, when we asked for the budget earlier, we could use that to populate a financial field. If we asked for the brief here, so what page needs a refresh, what are your requirements? We could actually put that into the project description. So that's kind of more present and more available for members of the project to kind of view and see. It could be that based on certain answers, especially in the case of what kind of work you're looking to do, that we assign to a given team on the basis of work selected. So, if it's marketing work, goes to the marketing team. If it's a research project, goes to the research team. That is a good sort of non sequitur into conditional logic. So you'll notice that as I was going through the form here, really just depends on what I select as to what route I take through the pages. So if I say brand refresh, I'm going to brand refresh one. If I say urgent work, I'm going to urgent one. And we also see a scale field. Is that what we call it? Rating based field, something like that. We can have a look in a second. But again, I'm jumping around the pages here using conditional logic to adapt, based on the answers already given. So as you saw earlier, this can be used for a few things, namely hiding certain answers. So if a client selects that a compliance document is required, then an upload field appears. If a client exceeds a certain budget threshold, maybe we can ask more approval-based questions. Maybe if a specific service is selected, an entirely different section of the form will be revealed. So maybe there's other steps or more pages that will become available to the client if they say yes to something. So this allows forms to adapt to different workflows without sort of needing multiple separate forms to capture sort of specific information. You can just have one 20-page form that covers any question that any incoming client of yours would need to answer, which is great. Now, forms don't just collect information, they can also automate how projects are created. So, like you saw a second ago, depending on the answer submitted, the system can apply different templates, populate different fields, assign managers, wrap projects into specific work stages, and launch entirely different workflows. So, for example, a marketing request form could create a project, assign the right team, apply a social media workflow template, and then trigger an additional approval task if like paid advertising and licensing is involved. So this is going to massively, massively, massively reduce manual project setup and ensure that work enters the system consistently every time. So as soon as we see a new job come in, it's not, you know, well, did we get this from the client? Well, did we ask about this? Well, do we know this information? You do, because you made sure that you did right from the beginning. The fields that are required, and everything comes through for the client on that basis. So now that we've kind of seen, I guess, some of the elements that are available in a form and kind of roughly what they look like, let's make our own form. So if I hit the create form option here, let's call it webinar demo. And we will say that this is going to be, let's say, in-app. What we'll do is we'll model this one after maybe that internal IT request kind of process. So this is for internal staff members to say, I need a new device, I need a new software package, something's wrong with my existing device or setup. Maybe I had a software request to sort of create a new process, something like that. So let's say that if something comes through, we don't necessarily, not there yet, category rather, and no categories available because I haven't created any. Good, okay, that's fine. We'll create one now. So up until I finished it, we'll keep it in the draft section. Until something's published, it basically won't be available to anybody else. And that's fine. And in-app only here, it can be changed at any given time, keep in mind. And also, we can sort of make determinations as to who actually has access to the form as well. So, if we did want to run that process that I mentioned earlier, where we have no one's got the ability to create a project, everyone has to go through a form, maybe even among that number of people who need to fill out the form, maybe only some of your staff members can do it because they go through one around. But yes, of all of your staff members, not everyone can submit a form, not everyone can create a project. Only these people can enter a form, and maybe these people can create a project directly because we trust them for some extra reason. Now, what did I say? We were hoping for a request. So let's actually kick it off with a single choice. So again, we will say that what is your request? And we will have options. This is a bug issue. This is a hardware requisition. This is a software requisition. And I spelled requisition twice correctly without needing to check anything. So nifty. Now that we've got these options available, so I just go done editing, three different ways we could go. So let's create three different pages. We can go page one, page two, page three, or page two, page three, page four. And then I'm going to call my first page bug, bugs and issues. And then because I intend for this to kind of be the last page here, I'm going to make the next or submit action to be submit form. That means if we do end up on this particular page, it will be a prompt to end the form as opposed to continue it, because I only want to have basically one page per step here. Well, two steps per any given way we might go through this, but I don't want anyone visiting more than sort of two pages worth once they've passed, well, one page once they've passed the first page. So I've got bugs and issues, I've got hardware, and that's also going to be a submit. And then I've got software. And then that's also going to be a submit. Now that I've got these pages created, I can come back to my top option and let's think about some automations. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say this first question, absolutely required. Have to have it in there. No way to progress unless you've asked this question. Next thing I'll do is I'm going to automate this first option. So I'm going to say it's going to be a form action, it's going to be a page action, and it's going to be a navigate to page, and then we're going to navigate to bugs and issues. So that means that if somebody selects this, the page that they'll go to when they go to the next page is going to be bugs and issues. Same goes with hardware requisitions, page actions, navigate to page, this time hardware. And then third one here, we are going to do the exact same thing a third time. Cool. That's not all though. I might want to layer a second automation in. So just on the basis that they've picked this, I want to go into ProWorkflow now and I want to say, as opposed to, setting a title, setting a description. In fact, I might want to set a title though. So let's set a title and we'll say this is a bug ticket. And then as well as that, I want to create another one that's going to add a template. So for this case, let's say variable costing template. That's fine. So I'm going to do the same for the other two. I am going to throw in, not client, the title. We'll call this hardware ticket. And then we're also going to add that template in as well. And then I guess we got to do it for the third one. Otherwise, I'm going to feel weird about it. Set the title, hardware ticket. And then actions again, templates, monthly retainer template. Cool. So already I've got this lovely first question that's going to set a project title that's going to determine where we're going in terms of the rest of the form and is also going to define a template that's going to be used. I've made sure that that's a nice required field. So the next thing that I might do is just chuck in a long text answer that just says, please further describe your request. Just gonna give my colleagues in this case a chance to kind of, explain themselves a little bit more and maybe talk about, what's kind of going on there. Now, I'm actually also going to add an automation to this one. There's going to be another ProWorkflow action where I'm going to set a description. So this is where I sort of get some information here. This is where we can either replace the descriptions if we did have defaults that were otherwise going to be entered. You can make sure those are swapped out, or we can add to the top or bottom of the page, depending. Oh, what haven't I done? Oh, I see. So this is basically just determining what text is actually going to be added into the description. And we want the further describe your request question to be used, or the content from that question. Now you can see here that we can also actually enter a default value and kind of further describe the question should we need to. So I'll just say this is a further explanation. And now when I look at the form, it'll have that detail. Now, we may be halfway through building the form, but it can be nice to actually see what we're doing and see what it might actually look like. So if we hit this live preview button here, that's going to start to tell us. So if I do select any one of these options, please further describe your request. This is a further explanation of that thing that we just entered there. And then if I do hit bug and issue and go next, cool, it's taken me to the bugs and issues page. And if I hit hardware requisition, there we go, hardware requisition there. So I'll close the preview now just because now I'm nice, feeling reassured about everything. So for bugs and issues, let's say we'll throw in a multiple choice and we'll say where has the bug been found? And again, maybe this is somewhere where I want to start specifying this is on our website. This was in an internal tool. This was in the main app. And much like before, I can start making decisions as to, what each of those answers mean and where they go. I can also throw in something like maybe a rating. Maybe how would you prioritize this bug? And that'll give the internal client, in this case, a chance to, specify, I guess, how bad we're looking. Now, this is a rating here, so we can go numbers or stars, which is very fancy, but we can also be a little bit more specific. So in the case that we're asking how we prioritize a bug, it's not necessarily the minimum label is bad and the other one is great. It's more that this is low priority, and then this one is high priority. So again, just making that form look a little bit more sensible. Now that I'm done here, no, I'm actually feeling fine about that. We can move on from there. So the rest, I guess you can quite easily imagine. Toggle switches, drop downs really just depends what we need to see. Um, but each field has its own sort of option here. So maybe the next thing I'll do, this is a hardware requisition. So this is somebody asking for a new laptop or something. What device did you require? And then they'll enter, their text here. Maybe we'll make it a max length of 180 characters. Give them a tweet length. And then the next thing we'll put in is a number. So what is the cost of this device? And you see in each case, depending on what I had there, I get a few more choices. And I can sort of do some conditional formatting on the basis of that. So in this instance, I could actually list a maximum value. So because this is maybe a personal hardware requisition, I'm going to say that there's a $5,000 maximum and go from there. Now I could put a prefix or a suffix in there. So that's again $kg, and I guess $sign in this case might be appropriate. And I can also, if I go into the sort of conditional section, this is where I could start making decisions like if the value is greater than $5,000, I guess I've set a maximum there, so they couldn't do that, but maybe if the value is greater than 2.5, I can then add an action where the project, maybe it's going to be approved by a different person. Maybe it just gets a high priority set or a higher priority set. So I could go into this section and say set priority to massive. Because the assumption is, in this case, if somebody's asking for something that's worth more than 2.5 grand, maybe a certain person needs to look at this before it can be approved. Maybe it just needs to pass over the sort of right approval process, depending on that value. So again, something we can very much do depending. And then we've got the software option right at the end here. So maybe this is one where we'll just give a drop down and we'll just say, is this a requisition? Is this like a new software or an expansion on an existing package? And then we can say new expansion and then other. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add another long text answer in. And we'll say that this long text answer is please elaborate. Now I want to tie please elaborate directly through to that last one. So again, we're asking a pretty cut and dry yes/no question. Is this a new thing? or are we building on something that we already have? They can either say it's a new thing, they can say it's building on what we already have, or they can say it's kind of neither of those things, it's kind of both of those things. We then want them to, okay, pony up. What are you actually talking about here? But we might not need to ask them to elaborate if they've said one of the other two things. So let's actually hide that field. I don't necessarily want to show them that unless they've said other. So coming, now that I've hidden that first one, I can come back into the first one, add an automation. This would be a form action in this case, and a field action. So in this case, I want to show a field, but we could equally require a field or hide a field. So maybe they don't want to show a field, namely, please elaborate. But I also want to make it required. Because if we've got to the point of saying other, then saying please elaborate, that actually becomes quite an important question at that point. So now that I've got a couple of questions and everything, I can actually start sort of go through the form and sort of look at some of these. So website internal tool, main app, hardware requisition. There we go. What's the cost? That dollar sign's showing up. What device did I require? That text entry is available. And then if I do software requisition, we can see that choosing other does indeed include please elaborate, and it is in fact a required field. So there you go. Now that I have my form ready, I'm going to go ahead and publish it. So you can see that now that I've done that, I can come into my add section, and webinar demo is something that is now available in the tool to use. Equally, if I wanted to send it to somebody, I can actually copy the form link, so I could send it to a colleague directly just like that, even though it does just exist in the form, in the tool rather, just here. Whew. Okay, well, I guess that's all we wanted to show you. So we'll move into the questions portion of the webinar. And it looks like we have one question so far. That would be, can you or your client send a copy of the form once it's been done? Now, the answer to that question would be, I suppose, okay, I guess fronting up, we don't necessarily have a export button on the form, but it is available on the project. You can make it available to the client, so they would be able to see it once they come to the project details page. The other option would just be a screenshot. That wouldn't be a terribly hard thing to pull off. So I would say we retain a copy of the form. It'll be retained within the project page itself. And if you did want to send it to the client via the tool, that would be an option. You could also, again, take a copy of a screenshot and grab it that way. And I guess that's question answered. Wow, okay. So truly, if anybody else has any questions, I'll hang out for another couple of minutes. But until such a time, I guess I'm small talking. Hope everyone's having a good morning. Be handy if I'd seen a movie or something lately that I could talk about. Oh well, that's fine. Um, do you think I should have written down some small talk? That would have been optimal, perhaps. But you know what? I guess we'll have to call that future learnings. When will this be live? That's a great question. This system will go live on Monday. So by then, you will have access to using it. Now, that actually does remind me, one thing that I haven't mentioned because I did conveniently navigate away from my system here before I moved to this page. Blah, 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 blah. Project intake forms. So I've talked about the public private thing. I've talked about, the relative control. The other thing, it's advanced only. So you will need to be on the advanced plan to have access to it. This is obviously relatively important to note. I guess that's kind of the whole thing there. Really didn't need to come back to the slide for that, did I? But I guess it is true and it did need communicating. So there you are. Oh boy. Okay. And until we're done. Okay. Well, I have to assume that'll be all the questions if none have popped up since we started talking about it. So there we go. I guess we can wrap up there, but I do have a little closing bit. So I'm gonna do that and then we can wrap up. The goal of these features that I've shown you today is just to make workflow management more structured, more flexible, and easier to scale. The calendar gives teams better operational visibility, while the new intake forms help standardize and automate how work enters the tool in the first place. And we hope you enjoy them both. If you do have any questions, if you'd like some training, if you'd like some help, especially building a form, my team will be available to help you do that. Just send us a message through either support@proworkflow.com or, of course, via the company chat. That is always an option to you as well. Lovely to have you all here, though. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoy the new features. And we'll talk to you next time whenever we have, I guess, more to talk through via webinar. But great to have you all here today, and I'll catch you later. Bye, everybody.